Welcome to the American Cinematheque conversation with director-writer Steve McQueen. Our moderator is Jamil Smith, senior writer from Rolling Stone. I'm Gwen Diglis, Deputy Director for the Cinematheque, and I'd like to invite you to visit our website where you can find the latest information about what's coming up at the Cinematheque, but also how you can support the American Cinematheque by becoming a member and making a donation. Your support is important. And Small Axe is streaming on Amazon. And I'd like to thank Amazon for making this conversation possible. Enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gwen, for the introduction, and welcome all. Again, my name is Jamil Smith. I'm a senior writer for Rolling Stone magazine, and I'd like to welcome the director of Small Axe, the anthology, Steve McQueen. Welcome, Steve.
How are you, sir? How are you, Jamal? Good?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, all things considered. First things first, I wanted to ask you about, not just how this came together, but the source of this within you, these stories. How did they, live within you? Because you grew up in, I know, in like the Hanwell section of London, and believe if my research is correct. And
I always get that wrong. I grew up in Shepherd Bush and Ealing. That's right, in West London.
Okay, so tell me, what your parents, what West Indian countries did they come from?
My mother and father from Grenada and Trinidad. They came over to London in 1962, settled in. They actually met in London, but they were from West London, so around the Shepherd Bush area, and that's where they met, around that area.
So, you present, especially, starting just with Mangrove. Well, you have a story that that harkens back to certainly their past and things they may have experienced. Are these stories that you grew up with, or in terms of the real life stories that you tell in this anthology? Is this stuff that you have been thinking about and trying to think about how to depict on film for quite a while, or is this something that came up recently as an opportunity and then you took it?
Well, again, it's part of my upbringing, these stories and things which I obviously grew up with. The Mangrove, the first in the anthology, and the trial, that was a situation where I found out about that. In fact, it's almost 15 to 10 years ago, literally. About 15 years ago, I found out. But the extraordinary thing about that was one of the main protagonists in the Mangrove 9, Gordon Roden, was one of my father's best friends. He used to come around the house all the time. But people were suffering with so much trauma after those events, even in recent times, that people just didn't talk about it. So these stories, and again, it was one of those situations where people were dealing with so much PTSD that it was just one of those things where people kept quiet about the West Indian community, or people knew about it, spoke about it, but it wasn't so overt because of the repercussions that came with that from the police. And again, it's one of those things where when I was 11 years ago is when I sort of started to sort of think, okay, well, I want to do something like this. I wanted to sort of tell, it started off as a TV, and it is a TV series. What it was, I wanted my mother to have ability to these stories. My father died about 14 years ago. And the whole idea that people weren't seeing themselves on TV or didn't have the access to even imagine having these stories accessible to them was something which I was sort of very much, that was one of the main motivating facts, basically.
So you see as a viewer, I see all of these films in sort of conversation with one another. You have various different aspects of these folks' lives, some fictional, some not, but at the same time, there's a coherent reality put forth. How much of this storytelling, knowing that you're going to have audiences that are not familiar with this experience, how much of that storytelling do you feel like was needed to be devoted to, say, explaining exactly what these lives were about. Because frankly, I think you do that visually, especially in films like Mangrove, where you have the repeated police assaults, and they're coming from all different directions. They're coming on the street, they're coming in the restaurant, and you feel like at a certain point, I mean, even I, someone who's experienced covering police violence here in the States, you feel like there's an unpredictability to the violence, and so it gives people an idea of what these people might have been experiencing.
I didn't think I had to explain anything, or help to explain anything, because these are human lives, and these are stories about, of course, specifically about the UK and a particular time in UK, but these are stories about humanity and human beings dealing with their every day, and unfortunately, in this case, hostile environment. So I didn't have to sort of do any kind of explaining other than tell the stories that what was there, and be as authentic as I possibly could. Just like when I remember sort of seeing, movies from South Korea, or movies from France or so forth, or whatnot. It was very specific, but it was very much about who we were as human beings. How someone fell in love in Iran, how someone fell in love in North America, how someone fell in love in Italy. There doesn't need much explaining about that. So yeah, I just went into it in a way as being as authentic as I possibly could.
Speaking of love stories, Lovers Rock as the second film, I wanted to ask you about the inspiration for that, and what experience that might have drawn upon.
Well, it was about blues parties. These were parties that people used to organize in their front rooms, basically. And they were, my mother went to blues in the early 60s, blues parties. Shabeens as, sort of an Irish sort of an understanding of that. And what it was a situation where West Indian people weren't very welcome in clubs, or there was a quota. So what happened was people sort of made parties in their front living rooms, and they charged to make a little money as well. And it was extremely popular. And my mother went to them in the early 60s, and my aunt, who Lovers Rock is based on, went throughout the sort of late 70s, 80s. And I went in the, a version of that in the sort of mid 80s. And I just remember so many things. But I remember, for example, my aunt used to have to take me sometimes. And I was her beard. And I would end up on a bed and wake up sort of hours later with all these coats on top of me. So that was the origins of what a blues party was. But it was about, again, it's about Black people basically doing it for themselves, not sort of not being disgruntled, but getting on with it, as we always do. We always invent or reinvent ourselves in every single department of our lives, because we're human beings in the best sense of the word.
One of the lines that struck me, also in going back to Mangrove, was the line about blood, Frank's blood running purer than politics. And of course, inevitably, we see that the politics, you can't avoid them. The restaurant, is sucked into this. How much of these inevitability of, I guess you could say, conflict or strife or what have you of Black life was part of this? Because I felt like it was in each of the films in different ways.
So can you repeat that question one more time, please? Sorry.
Sure. The inevitability of politics entering into Black life. There's no such thing as blood running purer than politics, unfortunately, for people who are oppressed. I just wanted to know, how much of that was something that you were trying to make at the center of the film, or is it the theme that you were trying to express? Because it's certainly one that I was able to perceive.
I think again, that was a light-hearted comment, because it was just interesting gambling. Frank was Frank. Frank was just being an everyday guy, wanted to open a restaurant for his friends and the community, and have a bit of gambling. He's just a happy-go-lucky guy. But that didn't last for long, because the authorities saw the Mangrove as a threat. And again, I think the authorities saw it as a threat because it was about the sort of local community, a home away from home, as far as West Indian food is concerned, and cuisine and the community, as well as the hoi polloi, as well as people like, Vanessa Redgrave, Nina Simone, Marvin Gaye, Jimi Hendrix, all kinds of different kinds of people, and intellectuals and Black Power movement being involved in it. So you had a cafe which had a certain kind of democracy to it. And I think what it was the powers that be saw that as a threat, where you could actually, have converse, have conversations with each other, and get normal people to understand, their surroundings on a level playing field. That's what I think that's where the threat was. As far as being Black and politics, I mean, look, as myself, I think. You're asking the question who, as far as Black people in the West, you're asking questions like who, how, why, and what at a very early age. That's what happened to me. So you politicize at a very early stage. Someone coming from the West Indies, in the sort of early 60s or late 50s, who has been surrounded by Black people. Yes, they were very politicized because of, particularly in Trinidad and Grenada and other places like that, and Jamaica, all over, Marcus Garvey and Stokely Carmichael and whatnot. But when they came to the United Kingdom, maybe they had a false idea of where they were, because this was the home country. But they soon found out other things are up.
Music, of course, is also a big motif, and a big part of the scenes that you're putting forth. I wanted to know, one of their audience members is asking, how did you choose the music for the films, and how important is it to you personally and as a filmmaker?
Well, very important. I mean, it's the sort of it's the bloodstream of the films. I mean, again, it's the bloodstream of how people survive. I mean, from my father's record collections of, I remember, God blimey, every Sunday morning listening to Jim Reed's. I mean, the Americans at that time used to bombard the airwaves of the West Indies with country and Western music, but the people, related to it because a lot of the people were, from rural areas of the West Indies, country. They were from country. So as we call it, as far as the countryside is concerned. So therefore, there was a big relationship with country music, because often it was about hard working and God and all that kind of stuff. As well as my mother, who was slightly younger than my father, she was a bit of a mod. She was into the Small Faces and all that early ska and stuff like that. I mean, so and the dub, of course, in Lovers Rock, I was so that was a love affair with dub, because that was all about futuristic music, and you know what I mean. And I mean, we can have a whole hour conversation about music, but I'll just
yeah, no, I was introduced to that when I was when I went over to King's to study, actually, when I was in college. And the just talking with some of the people in the neighborhoods about the importance of music in their lives, because one of the things that you depict is a lot of Black joy amidst all of this strife, and the parties in the streets, in the restaurants, and even the family moments that are lighter, even amidst some of the darker times. I wanted to ask you about the importance of staging that and making that a part of the narrative.
I mean, that's who we are. I mean, it's not about, I better put that in there because it's important. No, but you get asked this question, I think, my goodness, do people just think everyone's miserable? And obviously, we're talking about the West Indies. If you're talking about the Caribbean, it's totally, utterly different. I mean, and even in Black America, I mean, it's all about survival. It's all about joy. It's all about falling in love. It's all about the food. It's all about the clothes. It's all about the best of the best of the best, the best things in life. Absolutely. So we and we put one foot in front of the other. That helps us to put one foot in front of the other, because the environment is often quite hostile. But at the same time, oh my God, I got to get a new pair of shoes because I got to look fly. You know what I mean? So that's part of it. Oh, that's part of it. Again, my child has been kept behind in school. I'm going to fight that, but at the same time, I'm going to get my head down. So let's not play. We are just like military soldiers. We're dressed. We are dressed we're dressed for battle.
Wanted to get into Leroy Logan's story, and you started, of course. He gets basically the talk from his dad, as we, I know that my parents called it, when he's told how to behave with regards to the police, and then he sees that you know that violated, you know, when his father is assaulted, and then he decides to enact change in a certain way. Can you tell me a little bit about what drew you to that story?
Well, Leroy Logan was a hard one because at the time, it was a wonderful researcher. And first of all, you know, again, these films, you know, were co-written with Courtney Newland and Alistair Simmons. And Helen was a great researcher. Helen actually brought me the Leroy Logan story. Because I knew of Leroy, but you know, you saw him in the news now and then when he was actually head of the Black Police Association, and I didn't know about his background as far as a research scientist and what happened to his father. I don't want to say too much because people haven't actually seen it, but his father gets, I can spoil that a little bit. His father gets sort of beaten up by the police, and again, so. The fact that his father gets beaten up by the police, he leaves an amazing career to join the police. I just didn't get. But at the same time, because I didn't get it, I was fascinated. You know, 2 and 2 were not making thought to me, and I was like, wow, this is an interesting thing to pursue. So I met him. I met Leroy. I spoke to him, and through that conversation. That's what sort of got me intrigued, and I didn't get any further. I didn't get any good answers from him. But no, at the time, no, not at all. I think it was fronting. He's a policeman, you know. Policemen are police. We know what policemen are like already. They're, you know, it's like, you know, black or white. They're drilled. So it took a little time to sort of, you know, crack open. And I don't know if it's only through the process of actually filming and finding out about his relationship with his father. That's when I sort of, that's when I got hooked in, because again, I was thinking about my father, Courtney was thinking about his father, and John Baker was thinking about his father, and the relationship we had, this that masculinity of you know, West Indian fathers or West African fathers, and discipline, and that was interesting. So once I got into that, then I kind of, things just clicked, and we went forward, and then through that process, things became much clearer.
Can you tell me a little bit about the casting process throughout the series and how maybe it differed from film to film?
Well, I from the beginning, I worked with a gentleman called Gary Davey, who I worked with since Hunger. So I said to Gary, look, I want new young talent. I want to give people a chance. That was the main thing. I want to give people a chance, because I was given a chance with Hunger, and you know, I had to take it. And I thought, wow, I want to give people a chance, because often it's the case, you know, people, you know, in the UK at least, don't get an opportunity to sort of, you know, in effect, play themselves. So Gary, that was Gary's sort of remit, and that was long time ago. My goodness, I remember we cast Letitia Wright even before she was in Black Panther, and I didn't get it to audition, because as soon as I met her, I started talking to her. I said, okay, great. So that was in, I think, 2014. I cast her. That's bizarre, but true. I mean, goodness. I mean, that was weird. Never mind. And others. So that was a remit, to sort of look and find people who have that potential. Because also, what I want to do it, in effect, was to litter the environment with these genius actors, if I could find them, of course, and we did.
And how much of the dialogue, you know, it was improvised, or, you know, you mentioned that, you know, you were collaborating on the script, but was there room for improvisation throughout the film?
Why is that important?
I'm just curious. I was just curious because, I mean, you're depicting historical events. I was just.
Well, I think what it is, I mean, you know, again, for me, it's a case of, does it ring true? Is it, you know, does it sound right? Does it ring true? Because again, I never like to put actors in a straitjacket, but that period of time, there's a certain way of doing things and a certain way of acting or moving even, which is of that time. The great thing about the situation was that a lot of the people, in fact, majority of the people, for example, had West Indian parents and had West Indian parents who related to that time. So therefore, they were sometimes playing themselves. Similar to how maybe Scorsese sort of, you know, gets Italian Americans to come in, and you know, he could swing with it and people bring things to the table without him thinking about it, because they're of that ilk. And I think that's what happened a fair bit for sure.
One of our viewers is asking about the intimate camera work, and called it practically tender. And wanted to ask you a little bit about the cinematography, and what kind of look you were trying to achieve.
In what film you're talking about?
Throughout the series, you can talk about different things that you were trying to achieve in
Well,
different
it was
films.
horses for courses, really. It was horses for courses, and it was Chabier. Chabier, again, there was another situation of opportunity because, again, I usually work with the cameraman, the cinematographer, Sean Bobbitt. Sean was doing something else at that time, and therefore I was looking at a lot of reels, and I said I just want to work with someone who hasn't, isn't, established in that way. I want to look for someone who's up and coming, and I sort of met Shabby, and that was it. And I think from day one, I said to Shabby, I want to shoot on whatever format's necessary for the actual film. So, for example, with Mangrove, we shot on 35mm letterbox. I can't remember the ratio off the top of my head. And then we shot digitally on Lovers Rock. 35mm, but a different format on red, white, and blue. And again, 16. I won't go for the whole thing because it's boring. But on 60mm on Education. And again, it's about the communication with a cinematographer, because it's like a cinematographer is like I don't know, it's like a lead guitarist, isn't it? It's like, if you're a songwriter and lead singer and you got a vibe with it, it's like, a certain kind of vibe. And I think, Chabier coming from Antigua helped a lot in the sense of the way that he has a vibe for the West Indian culture, because, he's West Indian himself. So therefore, there was a certain kind of synchronicity, which we got in like that. And the intimacy, because, for example, I think this person must be talking about Lovers Rock. You had to get close because it was all about getting close. I mean, people work for the weekend. People work 5 days a week, in the most horrendous jobs and getting racial abuse and whatnot, but they work for the weekend. They work for that Saturday. And in that blues, which was circumnavigated by crocodiles and alligators and sharks, there was this place where they could be themselves. There's a place where people could be absolute themselves. So therefore, to get into that environment with the camera and to be within that surroundings, it had to be intimate, because it was just so much about the atmosphere and about the closeness that people got and about a certain freedom that people experienced. It was their church that Saturday night, for sure.
You mentioned earlier the casting of Letitia Wright. Of course, you have John Boyega, a number of other actors who are prominent and done wonderful things before this, and do amazing work in these films. Can you talk us a little bit about them, and also maybe some other performances that maybe have gone a little bit under the radar that you'd like to spotlight?
Why don't you tell me the ones that you want to talk about, and I'll tell you about.
We could start with John Boyega.
Okay,
Yeah.
the ones under the radar, because I could go backwards. Let's go backwards. Give some other time to shine, and we go to John and Letitia, if you don't mind. Hit me.
No problem at all.
Let's go for Sean Parks, I hope. So
Yes.
Sean Parks has been around the block a couple of times, but he's not being given an opportunity to shine in the way that I've ever seen. I mean, I knew Sean, but I didn't know him that well. I seen him a couple of times, and I didn't, again, I think sometimes the actors' confidence get knocked so much because of not missed, but sometimes just not be able to fulfill their potential and not being given a chance to fulfill their potential. And sometimes because of that, even overacting. Now I see Sean for me is like an Al Pacino in The Godfather. And I mean that seriously, because he is a person that has absence in his presence. He's the kind of person who doesn't have to do much to say a lot. It's like Miles, how many notes do you need? So he's so beautiful as a human being and also he can translate to you so much emotion through so little. It reverberates. So to work with him, to build with him, to give him the confidence to be, literally to be, was magnificent for me. That was really kind of, that was so rewarding. And again, you could see him shine on screen.
Indeed.
Shay in was his first time. Shay and Alex Wheatle. That was his first time in front of a camera. He's never been on stage before. Nothing. He's actually still in school. Actually, his first year. His first year in school.
Huh.
So we found him. Yeah, his first year in acting school. So we found him, and he came in. And again, well, he works beautifully for Alex Wheatle, because also so-called that naiveness was actually helping me, because Alex Wheatle is that guy. You know, he lands, and you know, a lot of things happened to him before he sort of planted in a hostel in Brixton in '78, and therefore, you know, he's a guy, a black man who is on a journey to find out what it means to be black in the late '70s, early '80s. And for Shay, he gave me so much, because I could never, you know, again, because of him not knowing certain things, he did things which I thought, oh my goodness, that's amazing. You know, and he was teaching me things in a way which I could never have had or thought of, because of his inexperience. But the inexperience was just it was extremely. When I say it was a gift. That's what it was. And he's such an amazing instinctive actor. So that was beautiful. Again, Amira in Lovers Rock. In fact, I only want to speak about people that we don't know, because we know Letitia, we know John, you know, because
Exactly.
But Amira in Lovers Rock, she was, it's her first time in front of the camera. I mean, she holds the screen. It's her movie. She holds the screen, you know, in a way where I don't know. I mean, she's so beautiful but thoughtful. I mean, she reminds me a little bit of, oh my goodness, who does she remind me of? There's a certain focus, something on her. I remember oh my goodness, as a French actress, I'll get it in a second. Oh my goodness, I'll get it in a second, because you know, I'm just, my dial is running. But there's a certain kind of, how can I say, an emotional depth to her, which I just translates. So yeah, she's amazing. She's amazing.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it.
Juliette Binoche. Juliette Binoche.
I would say wonderful.
There's a kind of thing about her and Juliette Binoche. There's when I remember first seeing Unlikable, and I imagine everyone out there is saying, finishing the actual title of the film for me, Unlikable Bearers of Being. Yeah, with Daniel Day-Lewis. Fantastic.
Speaking of inspiration, you know, in other films, like are there other films that you know particularly you just completely of the heart?
I don't do that. I don't do that. I mean, there's no interest. When you're on set, it's time to go. You have to look what you do, your research, look what you're doing. This is not about, you know, all of that stuff is in your head. You've seen 1,000 billion films already. But it's when you're in front of that scene, you have to think, what's the best way to observe and look at this? This is not a hobby. This is an art. And when you're sort of working, it's all about what happens there in the moment. And possibly your dial is doing things you don't know about, so things are happening, which you're doing, which has some kind of influence on what you've seen before, possibly not, but no, it's about being in the moment and letting things happen in the moment. I don't have a shooting list. So it's about what we do now. Okay, sometimes I will go to set, I don't even know what I'm gonna shoot, because I like that freshness, because I know it all. I read it, I see it, I wrote it, I have it. So when I go to set, it's like, okay, all right, okay, let's see what's happening now today. You know, it's about being in the present. What am I looking at? How do I want to do this? This is not, it's not about mimicry or anything like that. It's about the work. It's about the moment. It's about being there. It's about what that needs. What I'm looking at. What does it need? What does it need? And that's so exciting. So exciting. I don't know. I don't know. So that's even I don't know is the most exciting thing I feel often.
No, I mean, it's wonderful to get this insight. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm saying it's wonderful to get this insight into your process, you know, and also to the joy that the art brings to you. And that's wonderful.
Getting lost and finding it, that's the beauty. You know, that's, I've got it. I'll find it. Because it has to be in that four wall somewhere. You know what I mean? It has to be in that four, you know, it can't escape, it's there. And you got to find it. And that's exciting. That's exciting for a director. It's exciting for an actor. It's exciting to keep it alive, Of course we rehearsed. Of course we've done all these things. But at the same time, it's all about that moment. not in the rehearsal. Rehearsal, you find something else there. But then, again, okay, it's just exciting. It's exciting. It's exciting. I have no idea, honestly.
Have you directed films in the past where it was maybe less exciting because you tried different processes and you learned from that?
I don't play. I work. I don't play. No, I don't play. No, there's no time. There's no time to play. Clock's ticking, and in life as well. So let's do it. Let's get serious. No.
I want to ask us about the locations. One of our members of our audience is asking about how you chose the locations for each film. I'm also curious to know, were you able to shoot largely in areas, where these things actually happen, for the ones especially that were based on true stories?
Often the places where these things actually happen has been genderfied. I mean, particularly in Notting Hill, Ladbroke Grove, that's been genderfied a lot. I mean, you if you remember the Hugh Grant, Julia Roberts movie,
Yes.
Well, apparently that's what they think Notting Hill is, white middle class. Well, so there's gentrification in effect.
Yeah.
Moving on swiftly. But so a lot of things have changed there. So we had to find places and locations. Helen Scott, the production designer, was very successful in doing that. That sort of mimicked those areas. For example, All Saints Row, where the mangrove was, Henry Dahl, the guy called Dahl, who was Frank's best friend. He's still about 89 years old, still around. And he helped us very much in the shops of what was here, what was there. Oh, and of course, the old photographs we found, but it wasn't complete. So Dahl, Frank Critchlow's best friend, helped us with how to where things were geographically on the All Saints Road. And it was so amazing. One day, some old guy came, walked down the road and said, this reminds me of a place I used to live in, and it's somewhere in the 60s. And not Ladbroke Grove, but in Hill. So that was, if that's not a compliment, I don't know what is. So that was great. Thank you.
That's exactly what you want to hear.
Absolutely. He must have thought he's walking down the road and I slipped another time. I slipped another time.
I imagine how that must have been pretty confusing for a minute.
I would love, oh my God, would love that to happen to me. Never mind.
No, of course. Well, and to some degree, I'm sure, maybe, to some degree, watching these films, what was the experience of watching them completed in that order in which you released them? Because you obviously could have released them in any particular order. Why did you particularly go with that?
Well, I grew up with albums, and again, Mangrove, Lovers Rock, Red, White and Blue, Alex Wheatle, and Education was, again, I shifted things around at the last minute as far as Education and Red, White and Blue were concerned. I just love that kind of order. Of course, people don't have to watch it like that, but that's the way I again, when you put things down, you got to put it down. People can watch it any way they want, of course, but I would prefer people watch like this, but there's no straitjackets involved. So it's just a case of the storytelling and how one can relate to the other and go back and have conversations with each other as well. And I wanted to end the anthology on the I don't want to spoil it, but on perspective, on the perspective on ourselves as people on Earth. But we'll see what I mean by that later.
So, Steve, it is important that people watch them in order, you would say.
Well, important. I would prefer, but I love the fact that people watch things how they want, when they want, where they want. I would prefer, but as again, I grew up with Prince and stuff, and the album, Sign of the Times, there's a way of listening to the album, or even the Beatles, or whatever, or whatever album you're interested. There's a way of this, but this is a day of singles, or hits, or bangers, whatever you call them, and sometimes you just gotta chill before you get to can't be partying all the time. You gotta because there's a rhythm, there's a sort of geographic sort of journey. And that's what I want to do. This is very important for me because starting in '68, even though actually it's not classically sort of as far as historical, as far as dates are concerned, because of course Red, White and Blue is '84. But for me, there's a progress. '84, Red, White and Blue, and what happened to Leroy Logan, I imagine has happened to, if not most, but all Black professionals in one way or the other in any institution, when through no fault of your own, you're being kept back. And again, that was the whole idea of putting it at the end because it was '84. But I wanted to end on to keep on talking about the whole idea of possibilities and education. That was it. So that I had to sort of swap things around at the last minute. So it's great. It's great. It's like listening to the album. I don't know. That one's like that. That's not like that. I love, again, I don't want to keep on, but I love watching these things on screen, because in some ways you get an understanding of what they are, because once you finish them in a beautiful studio with all beautiful sound and whatnot, it's very different listening to them looking at them, excuse me, on a television or even in the cinema.
Yeah, I mean, I felt the same way. I actually was wishing that I had a big screen to see them on, and to be able to see them in a theater.
Yeah, we were very lucky that these films were debuted. We got Collective Cannes and New York Film Festival. Of course, we debuted Red, White, and Blue and Lovers Rock and Mangrove in New York Film Festival, as well as in Rome and in London. We were very fortunate and to sort of have that honor. And they are feature films, of course, but at the same time they were for TV. And because the reason why it was TV, because it works in that small acts ethos, accessibility and access. Sorry, I can't even pronounce words now. Accessibility, and it was all goes back to the fact that I wanted my mum to have a possibility of just putting on the TV and watching them on the BBC. That was it. To go through the bloodstream of the country.
Right. Were there any historical events that maybe you wanted to cover, or maybe hope to cover in the future that deal with, that time in London? I mean, there's, obviously we're seeing Red, White, and Blue happen in, a couple of years after the Brixton riot in '81, but there's, I wanted to know.
No, there's so many. I mean, maybe there's 5. I've done 5, so I mean, you could have done 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 more, but it's like right now, no. Right now, no. Maybe tomorrow, no.
Right, because I didn't know, maybe there's a process by which he sort of said, okay, I have like 7 stories I want to tell, and I can only tell 5, so let's.
No, I would have done all of them. No.
Well, we're glad to hear that. We also wanted to ask a little bit about, sort of the post-production. How, when you're done, a lot of people may be interested in what's your process with post-production and who you regularly collaborate with.
Well, I normally edit with a gentleman called Joe Walker, who's a great editor. And this time I was editing with a guy called, amazing editor called Chris Dickens. And that was, it got into be a situation where when we were editing, things just organically shifted into a situation of co-editing. Mainly when we were in London, but also primarily when we were sort of working apart. When I was in London when I was in Amsterdam, he was in London because of course, COVID, and him having to go back to his family, and obviously, he was working remotely. And that was amazing, that process as well. It was difficult, I got to say, at first, but again, when you're into the groove, it was actually a lifeline for me. So again, it was, and I've been editing since I was 19 years old. But it's just one of those things where it felt, because of the workload and also because I knew I wanted, it just felt instinctively a situation where we could edit together. That was great. It was a wonderful, wonderful collaborator, Chris.
In terms of the reception, you mentioned some of these festivals, but also, I mean, some of the people who are in these stories are still alive. And so I don't know if they've had a chance to see it, or if you've had other reaction from folks back in London to the films and their thoughts on things.
As far as Mangrove is concerned, I think a lot of people were really just happy to have their story told. I think for certain people it was hard. Some of the children, just because of having a history of their parents being so much about other things, their parents being about a freedom movement. And I think there's a lot of PTSD there for sure. There's not if but a maybe about it. And you know stories about children of Black Panther or children of Vietnam, those kind of things. So it's kind of tough. And I totally understand that. And also people like Leroy Logan, again, it's just, that was pretty amazing too. The response to him. It's the power of movies, the power of film, and how people can respond to him now. Respond to him now as in how they're responding to him before, and as well Alex Wheatle, and what's come out of the sort of cupboard as far as his concerned, and having this film put out there. And I got to say the power of streaming, an instantaneous sort of involvement of the public is pretty incredible, I've got to say.
Now, of course, I mean, there's a lot American audiences can relate to, especially African-American audiences can relate to police abuse, but also, a lot of the joyful scenes. What has been the reaction you've been receiving from American audiences in that regard?
Pretty much the same. Look, we're not a foreign language, and meaning that, not, again, it's not, again, it's this, again, I think, once everybody presumes maybe America is the narrative of the world, but again, I think, just because we, all I can say is that it's extremely similar. I mean, these are human beings within the Western world. And it's a very close relationship. It's been pretty amazing, the response given to it in America, particularly, I would say, from Black people and writers. And I've got to say, we just need more Black critics. We need more Black critics. We need more brown and Black critics. We just do. How can you have any kind of real reference on anything without that kind of experience when you're looking at something? It's like, a scientist would not sort of only have one perspective on something in order to sort of evaluate something. So we need more Black critics, we need more female critics, we need more Black critics, we need more people of color as critics. To have this around perspective, not saying that white people don't, they do, absolutely, some of them do, but often I feel that in order to have a more rounded sort of idea or understanding of things, you have to be from a certain kind of background. That's just how it is.
Yeah, no, we're thankful. At least I'm thankful, to have a Black critic here.
I'm sure you agree, Jamil.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, our Black critic at the Rolling Stone, Austin Collins, wrote a really wonderful review of Mangrove that I hope people check out. But as far as the last, our audience has a bunch of questions here for you, but I know we're running a little bit low on time. I wanted to ask you one of the specific thing about Mangrove. An audience member is asking, when you arrived to the courtroom, how did you craft those scenes to prevent them from feeling stale or slowing down, this kinetic energy that you'd established?
That's a good question. I mean, what it was about, okay, we had the first half of the film. We have the first half of the film, which is sort of course, there's a kind of organicness, there's a sort of kind of flow to it leading up to the court case, as well as the sort of, the police sort of involvement in the sort of demonstration. So when you get to the court, there's a kind of, it's very formal. It's very sort of, up and down, left and right. There's a real kind of structure to the proceedings. So for me, what happened in that courtroom and thinking about it and hearing about it and reading about it, particularly, from Alistair's research, because what happened was that at that time, transcriptions of that case, it was the year after people transcribing the case. That time they didn't have any transcriptions, so there was a daily newspaper. I think it was a sort of South Kensington Gazette or something that was transcribing the events of what happened. And as well as that, we had Ian MacDonald, who died, unfortunately. I had the great privilege of meeting him, and Alistair. So we had all his notes on the case. That's the white lawyer who was helping out on the case of Mangrove 9. So we had all of those documents. But what was so interesting for me was the gallery. The gallery for me turned into the congregation. The stand turned into a pulpit. The defenders turned into the choir. So what actually happened is that we turned the Black participants, the Blackness in that formal, the highest court in the land, the Old Bailey, turned into a place of worship, turned into a place of righteousness, as someone helped me out. That's it. So we turned that into a church. We turned it into a Black space. And that's what happened in the filming, because, and also to turn it from this, because it's very formal in the beginning, but slowly but surely we turn it into a place of Blackness, a turn of righteousness. So that's what we and that's where the jury sort of were brought in by that spirit in that space, and that's how that's how I filmed it in some ways, of how that place is turned around by Blackness. Yeah, it's very important very important, because again, it's not, and this is a space where for the first time, two Black defendants had the opportunity to question and cross-examine the establishment, the white establishment of the United Kingdom, first time. So when I get a situation where some people say things about, oh, the court case is this, it's almost like that white people at a certain point do not want to hear Black people talking and defending themselves, but talking how they would talk, speaking how they would speak, feeling how they will feel, in order to sort of, take down this power. Because at the end of the day, what's so interesting about this at the end of the day, if the Old Bailey, if they were not found innocent in that court, the highest court in the land, this white establishment court, people will be still thinking today, oh, they must have done something wrong. So that was the stakes of that moment. And that's why they had to turn that place of law into a church of righteousness, for sure.
I just want to ask another one from our audience. You've discussed your intuition on set, driving your coverage as opposed to storyboarding, shot listing, what have you. There's such a precision in your visual storytelling. According to the audience member, he feels like there's never a wasted shot. How did you learn to trust your intuition?
Well, I grew up shooting. I got a Super 8 camera, and a Super 8 camera is, I used to buy a roll of film and shoot. So it was about £5 at the time, and it was very expensive. So my goodness, if I shot, oh my God, that's like 20 pence. You know what I mean? As soon as I touch, 20 pence. I mean, like, yeah, I've only got 480 left. Right. So what happens when things like that? And I think that's important to understand how precious film is. So therefore, it's like golf in a way. You've only got a couple of chances. So in some ways you edit in your head, in some ways you see something, you feel it. And yeah, there might be some wastage, but you're more accurate. This is a craft, and it's about being as accurate as you possibly can. And I'm not talking careful. That's the worst thing anyone's ever said to me. Be careful. Don't be careful. But at the same time, you have to sort of get to the point where you learn how to shoot something that you feel is right. And yes, there will be wastage, but it's valuable. Don't forget, because a lot of people just shoot digitally and shoot like they spray the area like a machine gun. And there's an art to this. There's a way of doing it. It's there. Just think about it. And I'm not saying to be careful, but all I can say with me, I found it through the process of not having any money, and therefore having to sort of be accurate. And it's a craft at the end of the day. So I don't know. I'm happy that people say that, but it's one of those things where I learned it through having that Super 8 camera and having to get it right. That's all. I know that. I don't know how, but after a while, you are careful because it's too bloody expensive to waste.
I mean, that's amazing that you found a process of more or less improvisation, this improvisational process.
I found it not for improvisation because it costs too much money to waste.
No, I'm talking about now when you arrive on set, you don't know when you're going to shoot and things like that. You've arrived at that process, even starting from there.
That is not, I'm not saying it in a very cavalier. What I'm saying, I'm not being very cavalier. But what I'll explain, what I mean by that is that it's almost like an Olympic athlete. When you're prepped, when you've got everything in your head, everything that you could imagine in your head about that scene or whatever, even if you forgot about it, but it will come back to you when you're in front of it in that moment. So it's like that in the Olympic athlete. You train for 4 years for that 100 meters, for that gun to go. So, you can't, it's not about being ready on the day. You've been ready, you training for 4 years for that gun to go on a 100-meter line. So you better be ready. You know what I mean? But at the same time, I need to carry everything with me. And that's what it is, because you need also a little bit of looseness. You need a little bit of feel. Because I feel that being a filmmaker or being a director is like being a musician. You know the tune, you know the harmony, you know the melody, but there's a freshness. You need to bring a freshness to it. I mean, I don't do comic strips. I make films, and that's different.
Want to revisit a note of what we were kind of alluding to earlier, but precision. The precision of specifically the way you block a particular shot or focus on a particular thing within a shot. One of the things our reviewer noted, with regards to Mangrove, is how amazingly you stage things and how that creates almost an unsettling force within the viewer. And he thought about, and I thought about this too, actually, after I'd seen it, was Solomon Northrop, propping himself up on his toes during that lynching scene in 12 Years a Slave. There's a precision that you have in the storytelling. Can you tell us a little bit about how, maybe is all of that purposeful because is it something that you're inspired to do on set when you arrive there?
Got to look. I think this goes back into the other question. Look, just look, and then look again, and then look again, and then look. It's all there. I mean, it will tell. Sometimes the smallest things could tell such a big thing. So the smallest things could be such a big tell for your story. That example is huge because, the fact that someone's life is dangling by his toes, literally, it's such a big thing. All you got to do is look. So all you directors out there, people, just look and then look again and look again and then look. It's there. It's there. I promise you. It's there. I know storyboard. No, it's going to help you with respect. Okay, maybe there's for other people. For me, but no, because I want to be there, present. It's there. Something. It's you're shooting and guess what? It's raining. But script it's sunshine. Hey, let's just shoot in the rain. It'd be better. I never thought about that. It's like shooting is like the weather. You don't know what you have to address. And I think sometimes you have to adapt to the moment. And just like a musician, you adapt to things because that's part of you. This is what we are as human beings. We adapt and we move forward.
Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. And please make sure you check out these films and hope that the conversation helps inform your viewing of them. Everybody take care and stay safe.